On one hand, you have one of the most iconic rock bands to ever exist, and on the other hand, you have a band that's existed for decades putting out hit after hit. Nirvana came onto the scene and captured the world, but their time in the light was very short-lived. Foo Fighters has been making albums for 3 decades and still is at the top of their game. On top of all this, Dave Grohl was the drummer for Nirvana, and then after Kurt's death, he went on to create the Foo Fighters. Now, I'm sure we all know that Nirvana is one of the biggest bands to ever exist, but due to their very short-lived existence, could the Foo Fighters end up being the bigger band? So I'm going to break down all the metrics and all the numbers and see which band is bigger. This is Nirvana versus the Foo Fighters. Nirvana was born out of Kurt Cobain and Chris Novoselic's shared love for punk rock and alternative music. When they first met, Cobain gave Novoselic his demo tape called Fecal Matter. It would be 3 years after the two met that Novoselic would finally listen to Cobain's demo tape and make the band together in Aberdeen, Washington back in 1987. They went through a few different drummers and the band name before settling on Chad Channing and the band name Nirvana. They began playing an underground scene of the Pacific Northwest, performing covers and original material inspired by bands like the Melvins, the Pixies, and Sonic Youth. They played their very first show at the Community World Theater in Tacoma, Washington back in March 19th of 1988. After recording a demo tape in 1988, they used that to get signed to an indie label called Sub Pop. The label didn't really give them much money, and they were mostly funded by their past member Jason Everman, who gave the band $606.17 to record the album, as they listed that in the credits of the album. Nirvana's debut album, Bleach, was released in June of 1989, produced by Jack Endino, heavily influenced by the raw, sluggy sound of grunge and punk. Cobain's lyrics were dark and cryptic, reflecting themes of alienation and frustration. Although Bleach didn't initially achieve commercial success, it gained a cult following and established Nirvana as a promising underground act. It initially went on to sell 40,000 copies. While recording songs for their follow-up album, they became at odds with their current drummer, and shortly after added the drummer Dave Grohl, who brought a powerful energy to the band's sound. They said within 2 minutes they knew Grohl was a drummer for them. They decided they wanted to leave their indie label and were approached by a major label, Geffen Records, who bought them out of their contract with Sub Pop for $72,000. Produced by Butch Vig, Nirvana's second album, Nevermind, released on September 24, 1991, and sent them to international fame. Within the first week, the album went on to sell 400,000 units. It went on to sell 30 million worldwide. After the release of their album, tensions grew and the band nearly broke up. Cobain wanted to redo their royalty split as they were making a lot more money. Originally, it was split 3 ways, but Cobain wanted 75% and it to be retroactive. Fights ensued and the rest of the band reluctantly agreed. This left an everlasting bad taste in the rest of the band's mouth. Released on September 21st, 1993, In Utero was a stark departure from their polished sound of Nevermind. Produced by Steve Albini, the album featured raw, abrasive sound that reflected Cobain's dissatisfaction with fame and his desire to return to the band's punk roots. Originally, they recorded the album for just $25,000, but were unhappy with the end product. In fact, the label called it unreleasable. They got longtime R.E.M. producer Scott Litt to remix the album. He added more instrumentation and vocals. Although not as big of a release as Nevermind, it went on to sell 5 million copies worldwide. In November of 1993, Nirvana re-recorded their MTV Unplugged in New York performance, showcasing a more subdued and intimate side of the band. The setlist included stripped-down versions of their own songs and covers like Lead Belly and David Bowie's The Man Who Sold the World. The performance became their most celebrated moments, and it was released after Cobain's death in 1994. On April 5th of 1994, Cobain tragically died at the age of 27. His death marked the end of Nirvana, but their music continued to resonate with fans worldwide. Dave Grohl went on to form Foo Fighters, and Chris Novoselic pursued various musical and political projects. The Foo Fighters are a rock band founded in 1994 by Dave Grohl, former drummer of Nirvana after the tragic death of Kurt Cobain. What begun as Grohl's solo project evolved into one of the most successful, enduring rock bands of modern era. Known for their powerful melodies, dynamic live performances, and tireless work ethic, the Foo Fighters had created a catalog of acclaimed albums spanning decades. After Nirvana's end, Dave Grohl recorded a collection of songs entirely by himself, playing every instrument and singing. The demo was released under the name Foo Fighters, a term used for UFOs during World War II. The project quickly grew into a full band with auditions Nate Mendel on bass, William Goldsmith drums, and Pat Smear guitar, who was previous members of Nirvana. Released in July 4th, 1995, the Foo Fighters' debut album featured songs Grohl had recorded alone, and introduced the world to Grohl's songwriting and vocal talents. The album was a critical and commercial success, establishing the Foo Fighters as a serious contender in the post-grunge rock scene. It went on to sell 1.5 million copies. Color and Shape was released May 20th of 1997 and marked the Foo Fighters' transition to a full band effort. Produced by Gil Norton, the album featured authentic rock songs and introspective ballads. This album remains a fan favorite and often regarded as one of the best works. However, the recording process led to internal tensions, and the drummer William Goldsmith left the band, with Grohl re-recording most of the drum parts himself. The album went on to sell 4.5 million copies. After the departure of Goldsmith, they got Alanis Morissette's drummer, Taylor Hawkins, to join them. Released in November 2nd of 1999, the album There's Nothing Left to Lose marked a shift to more melodic and polished sounds. This album won the band's first Grammy for Best Rock Album and went on to sell 3 million copies. Released on October 22, 2002, One by One was recorded during a tumultuous time for the band, including near breakups. The band featured a heavier and darker sound compared to their earlier works. Despite mixed reviews, the album won another Grammy for Best Rock Album and went on to sell 2.5 million copies. Their next album, In Your Honor, was released June 14, 2005, and featured 1 disc of hard rock and 1 disc of acoustic songs, showing the band's versatility. The ambitious project also included collaborations with Norah Jones and Josh Homme. The album marked a high point in their career and was followed by their first acoustic tour. It went on to sell 3.5 million copies. Echo, Silence, and Patient and Grace was released in September 25, 2007. They definitely tried to experiment a lot more on this, and the album earned them multiple Grammy nominations and wins, further cementing their legacy. Went on to sell 2.3 million copies. With their 7th album, Wasting Light, they got producer Butch Vig and recorded it entirely on analog tape in Grohl's garage. And Grohl rejected any modern digital technology for this album. There's an entire documentary about this album called Back and Forth. Wasting Light was released on April 12, 2011, and marked the return of the band's rock roots. The album was a massive critical and commercial success, winning multiple Grammys, reaffirming the band's relevance in the rock scene. The album was widely interpreted as Dave Grohl's reflection on Kurt Cobain's death. It also featured Chris Novoselic. The album went on to sell 2 million copies. On November 10, 2014, they released Sonic Highwaves, which was accompanied by an HBO docuseries. Each song was recorded in a different city, paying homage to America's music. This was a very ambitious project, but it went on to sell 1.5 million copies. Touring for this album, Dave Grohl fell off the stage and broke his leg. He later returned to the show and finished the show. Afterwards, they wrapped his leg, and the following shows they dubbed the Broken Leg Tour, as he would sit on a throne. Their 9th album, Concrete and Gold, was released September 15, 2017. The album included contributions from Paul McCartney and Justin Timberlake. Didn't sell as well, went on to sell 1 million copies. Their 10th album, Medicine at Midnight, was released February 5, 2021, and went on to sell around 600,000 copies worldwide. Before the release of their next album, the band made a horror film called Studio 666. They released But Here We Are in June 2nd of 2023. The album will reflect on the grief and loss following the death of longtime drummer Taylor Hawkins in 2022. So let's start adding up their numbers and see how they compare. So they were in the age of CDs and cassette tapes that were still moving most of the albums. So how did those numbers compare? Well, Nevermind was Nirvana's top-selling album at 30 million copies. And actually, Foo Fighters' Greatest Hits was their number 1 selling album at 3.5 million copies. Total albums sold worldwide, Nirvana has sold 75 million copies, and the Foo Fighters have sold a total of 35 million, even though they've had way more albums to comprise those numbers. In charting, Nirvana has had 4 number 1s, and the Foo Fighters have only had 2 number 1s. Nirvana has had a diamond record, which is basically 10 million copies. The Foo Fighters have not had a diamond record. They've had 28 platinum records for Nirvana, and the Foo Fighters have only had 15. Even though streaming wasn't a thing during Nirvana's day, let's see how those numbers stack up, and actually I think you'll be very surprised. Nirvana's #1 streaming song is Smells Like Teen Spirit with 2.2 billion streams. The Foo Fighters' #1 streaming song is Everlong with 1.3 billion. In their monthly listeners, 31 million monthly listeners Nirvana has. The Foo Fighters has 18 million. Total streams between all their songs on Spotify, Nirvana has 12.1 billion. Foo Fighters has 8.7 billion. So now let's compare social media and YouTube channels. Nirvana's top video on YouTube has 1.9 billion streams, and that is Smells Like Teen Spirit. Foo Fighters' top video is The Pretender, and it has 587 million plays. Even though YouTube came way after Nirvana was around, their entire channel with their old music videos has 5.5 billion views. The Foo Fighters, even though they have vastly more music videos because they've been around longer, they have 2.8 billion views. Their total subscriber count, Nirvana has 9.8 million subscribers, while the Foo Fighters has 3.9 million subscribers. Across all their different social media accounts like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, Nirvana has 27 million followers, while the Foo Fighters has 21 million, with Facebook both being their biggest subscriber count. Recording music is just one aspect of a band. The other aspect is obviously playing live. So how do their top live shows compare? For Nirvana, In Utero was their top tour. Their top show for one of their dates was 19,000 people. They generally tended to play a lot smaller venues, but they did play a festival in 1992, Reading Festival, and that was anywhere between 50 and 60,000 people. The Foo Fighters did go on a Mile High tour, and they had about 50,000 people at their peak attendance, but they did play two different festivals. Lollapalooza had maybe 100,000 people, and they played Wembley Stadium, which had about 86,000 people in attendance. Usually with this caliber of music, Accolades, Grammys, and Hall of Fames are usually in the mix, so let's see how those numbers compare. Total awards, Nirvana was nominated 27 times and won 17 of those. For the Foo Fighters, they were nominated a total of 113 times and won 35 of those. For the Grammys specifically, Nirvana got 7 nominations with 1 win. Foo Fighters had 32 Grammy nominations with 15 wins. They were both inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Nirvana in 2014, Foo Fighters in 2021. So final verdict is it's a clear winner. Nirvana is the bigger band. Now, the Foo Fighters have been playing music for a very, very long time, and they've played to crowd sizes much bigger than Nirvana ever played to. And being a band for so long, they've accumulated multiple accolades, such as more Grammy wins. But in terms of a cultural impact, Nirvana was massive. And you can see that in today. They haven't been a band in, 30 years, and yet they are still having higher streaming numbers. A system that didn't even exist until more recently, after they have passed on. So even though Dave Grohl came from Nirvana, there's no doubt in my mind that Nirvana was a much, much bigger band, and they will continue to be a big band, but that's nothing to take away from what Foo Fighters has accomplished in their long, long career and is still ongoing career. So maybe over time, maybe they will have that hit. We don't know. Maybe the Foo Fighters has something in them that they haven't even begun to scratch yet, and that will be something bigger than Nirvana's ever done. Because let's face it, Nirvana can't make any new music, but Foo Fighters continue to make new music to this day. So let me know who you think is the bigger band. Have a great day.